In work, equally as in life, I think it's very valuable to always ride that line between having goals and having a vision for your life and your career while also being able to pivot. A lot of people are obsessed with chasing the trends. It makes sense. If you follow a wave that's very influential, like maybe you'll get something good out of that. I think there's more value put on chasing trends than on finding your truth. And there is value to that. And for me in writing scripts, I definitely got stuck early on in the trap of like wanting something to sound like a certain writer. I really looked up to these filmmakers, and early on it was mimicry and it wasn't influence. When you allow your multiple passions and influences to fuse together, well then that is kind of alchemical, and that combination is unique because you put those things together.
Hi, Julian. Welcome to Becoming You. Thank you so much for being on the
Of
show.
course, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I know you go by a moniker online, Righteous Robot. So we'll dive into that a little bit too when we get to what present Julian's life looks
Sure.
like. But you and I went to college together, and I just feel like I've been able to witness your life from afar. And luckily, we had some friends that got married. So we've seen each other here and there over the years. But I'm just so grateful to have some time with you today and to have this chat and have you be part of my present journey of becoming, as I think about, the creative outlet that this podcast is for me. So thank you again for being here. And let's dive into, wherever you want to start with those early stages of what may have shaped you into the person you are today and the journey that you're on right now.
I think it's funny that I still consider myself a young person despite being in my early 30s. I know not everyone would consider it that way, but I feel like at this point there's enough life to look back on to see what things influenced you greatly and which didn't. So, we rarely know in the moment what is going to be the most impactful, for better or for worse, in our lives as we grow. But yeah, now especially, I see so many ways that both positive and negative experiences in my life have impacted my artwork, my business sensibility, my overall, just life goals. And I think that's something that a lot of young professionals especially try to, I think, avoid or to like grow beyond is their past, especially when there is trauma or, not ideal circumstances. And we often want to kind of transcend and become a different person. But I found that so much of my most fulfilling work and my most successful work kind of takes a stronger look at my past and accepts that that is, for better or for worse, what made me who I am. And reconciling that in art is very fulfilling. But I think in life too, like you can be so much more grounded um, when you can really confront the past. So, I mean, for me personally, growing up in a super strict Catholic environment where the arts weren't necessarily a focus, definitely not a profession, opportunity, a professional option. Um, and yeah, in grade school and in high school, we were interested, or we were exposed to the classical art and literature. But I think with this filter of like, well, that's the great stuff, and that's not necessarily something that we can do. It's something that we worship.
Right.
So it was like an idolization of art and idolization of this great literature, and I very rarely felt empowered to pursue any of that or to like get it into my hands. So that's what I would do at home when I played with my toys, and I drew really bad drawings every single day because I felt this need to escape to different worlds and to jump into different stories and stuff. So fantasy, Lord of the Rings, escapist stuff like Star Wars and Chronicles of Narnia and all these like epic worlds and fantasies were kind of my escape from such a like cloistered, sheltered youth. And looking back now, I realize how much that's impacted my visual sense. I love world building. I love time period pieces. Um, And so, what at the time I saw as a negative of being so cloistered and cut off from the world has become an asset because of what I did despite of that, which was delving into colorful, textured, otherworldly universes, which is now kind of how I make my bread and butter.
Right, right. I love that. And when we were in school together, you were really into acting, and I believe one of the projects in school is to direct a production. And I remember attending these and seeing the improv and was always so enamored with your ability to just get on stage and be fearless. And I could appreciate it from the audience, but I don't think I could ever do what you did back then. And even now I've considered if I should try like acting classes just to learn some of
Oh,
those
totally.
skills, to gain more confidence in that way. Yeah. And I think I might, not that I'm going to be some glorified actress, but there's a lot of transferable skills in life, and I kind of like this idea of being a lifelong learner. And I'm curious from your journey, because I actually don't know this part of it. How did you morph from that acting producing side where you were creating productions post college to now what you're doing, or what you're really known for right now, which is the paper cut short films. And I may be saying that
No,
wrong,
no, no.
so definitely correct me. But I believe like the Gruff production that you just put out, I believe it was maybe something that you were doing on the side in conjunction with other work, and then it just got a lot of like publicity, and here we are today. So I'm curious how all of that's definitely impacted your current landscape and your bread and butter, as you say. But how much of that was by design, where you were actually being intentional and that was the path you wanted to take, and how much of it was circumstantial and accidental?
You know, in work equally as in life, I think it's very valuable to always ride that line between having goals and having a vision for your life and your career, while also being able to pivot. And oh, you're not allowed there. I'll get back to that.
No
This is
problem.
Jack. Jack. You wanted to make an appearance.
I love your cat.
You stay right here.
He's so cute.
Um, so, just in case we want to start that point again, I think in both life and in career, it's very important um, to ride that line between having goals and having a vision for your future, while also being flexible and being able to pivot when things aren't working out, or yeah, when frankly we fail at them. And I don't think enough people really talk about um, accepting failure and pivoting from that. We have such a grinding mindset in our culture today that you just have to blast through any closed door. And I think wisdom is kind of knowing which doors are closed for a reason. And I have found in the
Mhm.
10 to 15 year span that you just summarized, the most success, both financial and personal, has been when I have followed the open doors, and the most failure and the most rejection has been when I've tried forcing open locked doors. They're closed for a reason, they're locked for a reason. And so leaving college, I definitely still had that mindset of wanting to be an actor. I still very much value that skill. It gave me a tremendous amount of confidence in all my future endeavors. And so moving out to Los Angeles, where everybody wants to be an actor, you're hit with rejection immediately. And
Yeah.
in a
Hmm.
safe environment like college, where especially ours, which was so small, you're pretty much guaranteed to be in the plays if you audition. And we got to explore some really great classical literature too. We did a lot of Shakespeare. There was this concentration on making great art. And so going to Los Angeles with that, oh, I want to act, I want to perform transformative art, it was a culture shock because, yes, while there's a lot of work out here, and many actors who want to be a part of it, the quality is so varied, and it mainly sucks. It's Which isn't a bad thing. Everyone is like practicing their craft out here, and that's what makes this city so vibrant and so diverse and energetic is that everyone's working on something. And while I say that a lot of it sucks,
Mhm.
I've learned to kind of embrace that in my work, because a lot of us are also afraid to do work that sucks because we're afraid of someone saying that it sucks. But there is this energy of just hustling and trying to make things, to make your dreams come true. And so I was trying to do that with acting, got some parts here and there, but I was really trying to force open closed doors, and it wasted a lot of time that I feel like I could have spent really listening to my own um, inspiration and into my own past, as I had mentioned before. Like, well, why do you enjoy doing this? And it wasn't until I got roles in slightly bigger budget productions where I could see like the machinery of how filmmaking happens, and how on a slightly bigger budget you really can build like these really cool worlds. And I found myself being so much more interested in the crew that was behind the camera rather than what I was supposed to be doing in front of the camera. Because as an actor, you're just one small part of the machine. But I started to kind of look at the other, on that other side of the camera, which combines photography, it combines lighting, there's music, like there's so many more aspects to making a film than just the acting. So it was a slow transition until I
Right.
realized that doors were starting to open in that area of my life. And then I did a little bit of fine art, painting commissions and stuff that paid way better than anything I had done acting wise. So I thought, okay, that's kind of an open door. So financially and creatively, some doors started opening, and as I followed those, better doors opened. So yeah, at one point there was a formal decision to part ways with my agent and manager and say like, look, this has been great, but I think my heart and my wallet are both in on the other side of the camera. Like, I'm getting work as a cameraman, I'm getting work as an editor, I'm getting work painting, and all that was so much more exciting than, driving hundreds of miles every week to auditions that will not pay off. So that's the long long way of saying that the following the doors that were open
I
opened
love
them.
that. Such a beautiful way of saying it too. And I'm sure you're familiar with Rick Rubin, and he wrote the book, The Creative
Yes,
Act, I think it's called.
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with him.
Okay, yeah. So he talks about, right, yeah. I think it's gotten a lot of publicity in the last year or so. He's appeared on a lot of different podcasts to talk about the book. Um, but in that, he talks about the concept of creating art for yourself, where you are following your intuition and it's an expression of something that's within you, which is unique to you as a person, versus creating it for a commercial component where you're trying to make money off of it and you're appeasing towards that audience, the unknown audience. Who's going to pay for this? Who wants it? What do they want it to look like? And it becomes very diluted and probably less authentic from the expression of the person.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, when you say that the art in LA, you know, isn't that great, is it because people are trying to work for someone else and trying to create something for someone else, or are they really struggling with hearing their own voice, but they are working at whittling that down?
Well, I don't think it's specific to Los Angeles, but in most creative ventures, I think a lot of people are obsessed with chasing the trends. And it makes sense if you follow a wave that's, very influential, like maybe you'll get something good out of that. So there's I think there's more value put on chasing trends than on finding your truth. And again, uh that's another example of a closed door versus an open door. Chasing trends, there might be some open doors, but you're chasing popularity, you're chasing what's just relevant today, which might not be relevant tomorrow. And so I think that uh, there's something to be said for being a master of your craft and holding yourself up to standards. So I'm not saying that, well, just be rid of any current standards of good work, of fine art. There, skill is skill is a thing. Everyone says art is subjective, and I totally believe that. But there is such thing as objective skill. There's a well lit scene when you're filming it. There's a badly edited video, and so there are standards for what's good or what's not. And more often than not, you're going to have to impose those upon yourself and learn those yourself. But I think before doing that, people are jumping towards trends and seeing, well, what's everyone else doing, and how do I mold myself to what's popular today? And in 10 years you're going to be left without a strong skill set because you molded your skill sets to a trend. And as someone who has very much experience in chasing those trends, in my art, I found that work is just so outdated, and it is not formed in truth. And the second that you start blocking out those voices and really focusing on bettering yourself and making like strengthening your skill sets and listening to your truth rather than the trends, um, that becomes attractive work, and that starts to set trends. I mean, you think about new music that ends up on the radio, that you know when there's a new song and it just sounds so different and you can't help but turn the knob up, like, whoa, what is this? Who is this? Nobody else quite sounds like this. Well, it's because that person focused in the studio on making something that was unique to them. And guess what? That starts trends. So what I like to say is, don't focus on trying to be the best, simply do your best, and someday it might become the best.
Oh, I love that.
So
Yeah.
keep your nose in your work, do your best,
Yeah.
and don't worry about what the best is, because it changes.
Right. No, it definitely does. And you've always struck me as one of the deepest, wisest people I know. And I love just hearing you kind of express your heart in that regard, or the thoughts that you have, because you're very articulate. The position of fame that you find yourself in has exposed you to several different opportunities to get interviewed, either on articles or news outlets. And it's just been great hearing how well you capture this time in your life and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I think back to, based on what you're sharing now, is how do you move away from trends and find the passion within yourself? I think back to when we were in college. You had created several different art pieces and put it out on the lawn to sell it. I forget the concept exactly what brought that about. But there was one piece that was on a canvas, and it was the strawberry from Across the Universe. So if anyone likes the Beatles out there, there's like the logo from Across the Universe, and it's this splattered looking strawberry. And I loved the Beatles in high school, loved Across the Universe. I was so drawn in with the strawberry. I thought it was the best thing that ever happened. I'm like, how did you make that? It was so cool. I still have it. I know I sent you a photo of it. But because you have it signed in the bottom, it brings me so much joy. But I also remember me expressing like a variation of that joy back then. And you were kind of like, it's whatever, because it wasn't like your art, I guess.
Exactly.
Or maybe it was just something that you were like, okay, but I just looked at someone else's and I made this. It's not that great or special. So I'm curious, like, from the time, where you were kind of maybe mimicking other people's art back then to now you're making commissions and specific unique projects that are a true expression from yourself. Where do you dig deep inside yourself to pull, that inspiration from? Because I think for a lot of people who are visual or whatever the case is, it's hard to just create out of thin air. So it kind of has to come from something. But if you don't want to copy other people, how do you, bring that creativity to life?
I mean, I think anyone in a creative field has to copy at a certain point, especially when you're starting out. I mean, you think about even in the culinary field, like you can't banish cookbooks from your life because you want to be a chef. And like, well, it's only going to be original stuff. You have to try other people's recipes, and then you can kind of evolve from that.
Mm-hmm.
So in my early career, so much, like any creative venture that I went down was, I won't even say the word influenced by other people's work. It was dictated by other people's work. That Across the Universe painting was just a copy, really, of what I saw in the movie. So it didn't feel like it was authentically me. But it got my hands moving. It got my brain and my hand connected to making something that looks cool. And while the concept was not original to me, getting that practice is important, and there is value to that. Um, for singers, like you sing other people's work before you start making your own stuff, and a lot of singers don't even write their own music. So there's nothing wrong with, I think,
Right.
uh, being aggressive and hungry for influence and hungry for, like, I just want to try. I want to be in other people's shoes for a little bit and see what this feels like. And for me, in writing scripts, I definitely got stuck early on in the trap of like wanting something to sound like a certain writer. Be that a Quentin Tarantino script or a Paul Thomas Anderson script. Um, and I really looked up to these filmmakers, and early on my work was very uh, it was mimicry, and it wasn't influence. And I think that just comes with practice and time. Is it's okay to play in other people's sandboxes and kind of try on their voice, try on their style, um, but then try on other people's too, because your special combination of your influences might actually be what makes you unique. And that's what I have noticed looking back on my early life, is like, well, I love period
Mhm.
pieces, anything with chainmail, swords, I'm there, fantasy, sci-fi. Um, and
Yeah.
rather than
Yep.
like trying to make my copy of Star Wars or my copy of Lord of the Rings or something, um, when you allow your multiple passions and influences to fuse together, well, then that is kind of alchemical, and that combination is unique because you put those things together. Similarly, with in the culinary profession, like,
Mhm.
okay, if you're influenced by Greek cuisine, but then you also really like Mexican. Well, the way that you fuse those things together is what makes you unique. But you didn't invent Greek cuisine, you didn't invent Mexican cuisine. So I think pursuing art is very similar. It's okay to have influences. It's okay to let things kind of define you early on, but just understanding that the more influences that you pull from, and the more ideologies and the more belief systems that you can kind of blend and combine, the stronger of a person and an artist that you'll be. Because if you just chase one style
Mhm.
and one voice, you're only ever going to be as good as that, and you can never transcend beyond that.
That's really well said. And it just gives me so much to think about too, especially from your perspective as artists. I think in corporate America, or working more structured, or where your work is more structured and your thought process has to be more analytical, the work tends to be prescribed onto you versus you being able to kind of speak truth into existence, in the opposite way, where you're pushing the energy out. In a lot of places, you're bringing it in and trying to internalize it. And then, um, I guess it's more carbon copy. I can't speak for every person who, works a desk job, but it's definitely, there's a difference,
Yeah.
between having that creative outlet and then just having someone tell you, hey, I need these things by 5 o'clock.
Hmm.
There's not a whole lot of getting in the flow or intuition that you can follow when you're, just following a list of tasks to do.
Certainly. And I mean, look, it's all well and good for me to be talking about cuisine and painting and music and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to be a part of a team, even in the creative world. And, there is a boss, and there are deadlines, and there is a budget. Um, so, all this theory and all this
Hmm.
philosophy is all pretty and inspiring and gets you going. But sometimes at the end of the day, you have to turn out a product, and that's important. And knowing how to be a team player and how to stay true to yourself while also molding your voice to fit someone else's voice is super important. Again, I'm lucky enough to be making my own stories and my own movies now, but um, I'm still interested in collaborating with other people. I'm totally open to working under someone who might want to use my unique skill set, to help make their project come to life. So there's a great value in humility and being a team player. And I don't think that in a corporate 9 to 5, it's so easy for people to say, well, that's not going to be creative at all. And maybe it might be. Specifics are that's unique to everyone on their own. But I think within any role, there's an opportunity to combine ideas and to get inspiration from others and to kind of create, if that's making a portfolio or a schedule or planning an event, that is an act of creation, despite it not being a painting or a song or anything. And
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
it's just a change of your mindset. If you can find that passion and that
Hmm.
excitement to blend and combine ideas and infuse it with your own voice, then even in the corporate professional world, that will be sought after, because that makes for great work.
It really does. Yeah. And as someone who's in, events and marketing right now, I can speak to that definitely. And I think back even to my early career in sales, there's these elements of bringing your unique self to the role, because you want to differentiate yourself and you want to be memorable to people.
Totally.
And I think we do that through creative expression. It may look different, depending on the job or the job that you're doing or the team that you're on. But I think that was a great tie-in because you're right. Business is business, and that kind of looks the same no matter what industry you're in. There's certain elements that are more task oriented and they're critical to the production. And if you don't have them, it doesn't matter how flowery your philosophy is and how wonderful it sounds. It won't get very far,
Exactly.
in reality. So thank you for pointing that out. So I know you mentioned to me the last couple months have been totally crazy busy for you. And I don't know how much you want to share, but you do have a following that I'm sure would be interested in hearing what that has been like for you. And I know you have a couple things on the wall behind you. Maybe you want to walk us through those, but I will leave it to your discretion how much you want to share.
No, I mean, kind of going off of the last point of concentrating on your work and it being a little bit more logistical and less flowery and creative. um, the last month since I released Gruff has been a lot more talking about it, which has been nice. The work is done, and now I can talk about the inspiration, talk about the process. But the process of making the film itself did not feel romantic and expressive and all these things that we associate with making cool transcendent art. Like, it was a freaking grind for years, and there were exhausting moments where my skill sets were, how do I word this? I had reached the max potential of my skill sets, but the shot, or whatever I was doing, required so much more. So education was a part of it too. I had to be teaching myself how to do a lot of these things as I was doing them. I was laying down track as the train was going on for 2 years. So nothing felt
Right.
expressive about that. Nothing felt yeah, it was a grind. And that's when the other skill sets of patience and resilience and discipline come in, that are not sexy and that are not glossy, but are so pivotal to any profession. Um, and so, yeah, the last month it's been nice to talk about it and say, oh, here's what inspired me and whatnot. But the few moments after a project
Yeah.
is complete, and then the few months when it's like in your head and it's dream world before you're starting to really write it, those are definitely the most abstract and the most you know uh, the most in dream world. But for the majority of the time, it is really grinding out,
Mhm.
trying to do all these technical things that I'd never done before. And so what I found was that,
Mhm.
very accidentally, that sharing that process and being vulnerable about, well, here's how I'm figuring things out, and I don't really know how to do certain things a certain way, but here's how I fix this problem, that ended up garnering so much more interest and so much more of a following than by posting um, only finished work, perfected work, polished work. So that's a new lesson that I am still telling myself moving forward, is that, especially as far as social media goes, people are attracted to process, not product. we're fed product every day on the radio, on billboards, in commercials, and when someone is showing when someone shows process and iteration, that's
Mhm.
human, and that is like we want to follow a story,
Yeah.
not a product. And so what I found is that even though people didn't really know too much about the story of my short film Gruff, me making this and figuring it out in a medium that hasn't really been like iterated on too much, that became the story. And so
Mhm.
being able to then capitalize on that really
Right.
quickly and start a crowdfunding campaign, people were investing in that journey. Of course, I told them what the film was about. There weren't any huge surprises, I hope, but um, people were invested in that process and that story, and they waited for like well over a year to see the final result. So
Mhm.
um, I think
Mhm.
that just moving forward, that's something I have to continue reminding myself is, it's not, yes, I'm trying to make final products that are polished works of art, but human beings also enjoy process and they enjoy seeing people struggle. That sounds so negative, but all the greatest stories have a tremendous amount of conflict in them.
Yeah.
We like seeing conflict and see how people
Right.
transcend beyond that conflict. So that's how I got to where I am today, at least as far as social media, was just kind of sharing the process and not being precious with, thinking that this was a proprietary or a secretive process. Just get it out there, share what you're feeling, and people will come.
Yeah. And it speaks to this journey of becoming too, right? Like I like process obviously because I want to peel layers back and figure out how did we all get to where we are today and where are we going in the future. So it's great that you were able to kind of accidentally expose that portion of the work that you were doing too. And it resonated with people. You know, you have a very strong, loyal following. Their comments are positive. They want to see you succeed. And if anything, they want people to pick you up so that you can do more work at a higher budget
Yeah.
level, you know, so you have more support and you don't feel tapped out with your skill sets. Although I love that you took that as an opportunity to learn more and to, again, show the before and after. I know you had a few of the main characters that were somewhat two dimensional before you figured out a way to kind of build on that, or they started out as only paper and then you were like, this isn't sustainable, I need to add a metal component
Yeah.
to it. And then talking to people about that, I wouldn't have any language about this if I had only watched your final video. I would have been like, that's cool. Was it AI? Nowadays we have no idea where stuff is coming from. So seeing behind the scenes brings us one step closer, gives us a peek into the creative process, and makes it more real, so we don't question your credibility as an artist either.
Exactly, and I find that that's something that I really value in the people that I follow. Is I like seeing them work on their stuff, and I like seeing their studio. I like seeing their hands get dirty with the paints and the materials that they're using. And then the final piece is, oh, cool, whatever. Like that's beautiful. I'm so glad that you made that. But to see the inner workings of something is really just fascinating for humans,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to things that are kind of outside of our skill level. It's what people in this field call edutainment. It's educational, but it's also entertainment because we like seeing people execute a skill that we can't, and we get a kind of satisfaction from that if it's really detailed or it's really time consuming or
Hmm.
really precise. Now those are all like the satisfying videos or ASMR or whatever. But there's some science to that, I
Right.
think, of just like, we like to see a skill level that we don't necessarily have, and whether that inspires us to try and do the same or we're just entertained by how something is made. um, I don't know. I think that that's
Hmm.
a very important part of the human brain that we can't ignore. Um, so yeah, just sharing the final
Yeah.
product, I think, is wasting an immense amount of influence that you can have over a community or an audience.
Right. And it is mesmerizing, even watching your short videos of behind the scenes and hearing you talk through each element. It's mesmerizing to me because it's stuff that I could never even see myself doing. So it's not like, oh, Julian did that. Let me try that at home. It's like, wow, I don't know how you did that or how you even have the patience to do that. And patience was one of the things that you brought up in this conversation too, as a skill that you were able to weave into this process. And I don't know if you intended for patience to come across from these short clips and these reels, but that was one of the most impressionable things to me watching it was you just need an immense amount of patience, not only because it took years to make, but you're talking about thin material and very precise, lines. You made multiple mouths just to move, along with the story. And that's the type of thing that I would become frustrated
Mm.
by. So I think there's a lesson in that of just, even if patience looks different in my life, I can apply that same concept just by having the influence and the example set before me in the mode that is comfortable for you, which is this art avenue, which I love. So it's very transferable. You don't know how it's going to resonate with people. But I think it's great that you did that.
Oh, thank you. No, yeah, I really appreciate that.
I don't know if it was intentional. You're welcome. Yeah.
Patience is one of those things that if someone asked me if I was a patient person, I would say absolutely not. I like to do things quickly and I like to get done with, especially film projects, quickly. And that's something that so many people out here in LA, everyone has an idea for a short film, yada, yada. And it takes months to get the team together. And then not everyone's invested in it. Then, a miracle happens and you get to film it. And then it takes like months, if not years, for someone to edit it because, it's not their main focus. So I
Mm-hmm.
hate that stuff. That's why I work very independently. I am my own team, and I like doing it all myself for that reason. So it's very strange to me that I was able to stick with this for so long because I would not typically consider myself a patient person. I like to, write it, shoot it, edit it, post it, done.
Right.
Um, so I,
Right.
I don't know if it was because this was so new to me and I was kind of discovering it that I kept going every single day. But more than that, I think it was just seeing every day individually as a task to be accomplished. Because if I saw the mountain of work that was going to be this film, I think I would have quit, in the first 20% of the project. But ignorance is also bliss
Wow.
because I thought, oh, I could probably knock out this whole movie in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it took, over across the whole thing 3 years is probably just the ignorance of it. But I still wanted to see it through, and um, because every single scene, every single shot was its own unique set of challenges. I just wanted to overcome that challenge that day, and then the next day was just a new one. And I guess at the end of it there was a film, and I guess at the end of it it was 3 years, but it certainly wasn't a decision of like, be patient, oh my gosh, see this through, because I'm so impatient.
Right.
But that goes back to what I like to say of just don't try to be the best, just do your best every day. And when you're in a project that's going to take a long time, don't try and complete the project every day. Complete today's tasks as
Mhm.
well as you can, and as efficiently as you can today. And you add enough of those up, and you'll have a great finished product.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And just the consistency. I mean, you were, let's say, about 60, 70% of the way done with the project when you started getting that momentum and the crowd surfing or what's it, crowdfunding? I'm like, crowd
Rubin,
surfing.
sure
What am
thing.
I talking about? Yeah, exactly. Where you just kind of get that added momentum where the community is basically taking you the rest of the way across the finish line with their support and their encouragement. And I think that goes a long way too.
Right.
We are individual people, we have our own journeys. A lot of what we get done in life is our own responsibility and it is up to us, but there's something to be said about that community aspect too, where it just makes it a little more worthwhile, or it helps you get through some of those tougher times where you do just want to give up, and maybe you don't want to press on, no matter how good it might be, or you think like this is worth it or this is the right thing to do. I feel like so often we do things because we think they're the right thing to do. I have to finish this because I started it and I said I would, and I'm not a quitter. But if it's not like aligned anymore. I don't know, and that's what I think about as we look to the future too. Like the work you're doing today, do you see it aligned, systematically, I guess, stepping towards whatever future goals you have? Or is it more of this iterative process where you follow a door that's open, you see where it leads, you don't think too far out because you don't want to get overwhelmed by the process, So what's going through your head when you think about, the work you're doing today and what that means for your future
I
self?
still like,
And doesn't just have to be work. It
yeah,
could be, anything.
I still like to take it one day at a time, because uh, as I've altered my lifestyle to following the open doors, I have, like I said, found so much bigger doors and more fruitful avenues that come as a result of that. So it doesn't make it easy to answer when people say like what's next or like what's in the future, because I've really just learned to trust the process, and that as long as I'm doing my best every day, opportunities will pop up. Like I literally don't know what's going to pop up in my email in 10 minutes or 10 days, and that could alter the course of the rest of my life. So I'm open to that. Again, it's finding that line between being all right with pivoting or flexing, but then also having your own plans. So say nothing. I don't get a single email, for the next year or two. I'm not waiting for that. I have projects that I want to continue doing on my own. I literally the biggest problem is just deciding which one, which world do I want to get into. But I've got piles
Hmm.
of scripts that I've written that I'm ready to get into if nobody calls, if nobody wants to work with me. Fortunately, I don't think that's the case. I'm entertaining a lot of different things right now and just kind of figuring out what's the best next step for me creatively and professionally. Um, but I think it's important to always have that personal base to fall back on, like what makes you happy. And for me, that's making art. Whether someone's going to pay me or not, I'm going to do it. And I don't think I answered this question that you asked much earlier, but kind of finding that balance between doing something as a hobby while you're grinding away at a job that has nothing to do with your hobby. And that
Right.
really is how this process started,
Hmm.
whether it was the writing or the filming of it. I was doing it between jobs for the first year and a half or so. And I didn't mind that because it was kind of my escape from jobs that I wasn't as passionate about. Um, but it gave me such a base to return. It felt like coming home. Oh, this is that personal project that I have, and it doesn't have to necessarily be creative. For a lot of people, that literally is just exercise or watching their favorite shows, once a week, just having that like exciting thing to, or having a community of friends. Like, we go out once a month and we all catch up and we don't talk much in between then, but, we have that truth that we come back to, that community, that project, that hobby. So I think no matter what you do in life, it's nice to have that not side hobby, but to have a foundation that you can return to, and the more that you foster that foundation, the more you can pull from that well, and infuse that into your into the jobs that you have, whether you love them or not. um, but I think when you don't have that base, when you don't have a foundation of belief, of community, of passion, then you'll be even less happy when you're pursuing things that you're not passionate about and that you have to do for work.
Do you think you'll continue to have an outlet on the side even as your work becomes something that you're more passionate about? Or will you not need to escape as often?
That's a really good question, because when I was lucky enough to get this project funded, and the whole pitch of the crowdfunding campaign was help me take a year off of my side jobs to only focus on this. So I still took like one or two here and there that were either like personal projects, or like friends projects, or ones that I strategically wanted to get done in a couple weeks. But for the most part, once Gruff was funded, that was the main job. So there wasn't that thing to go back to at the end of the day. It was literally my morning, noon, and night, which was not easy. And I felt, um, I definitely felt worn out and I felt a little claustrophobic from it, but I didn't feel like I was allowed to feel overwhelmed by it because I thought, well, this is, you know, a great honor. Like thousands of strangers from around the planet have helped pay for you to take the time off of not fulfilling work to only do the fulfilling work. So it was hard. I really didn't give myself too much permission to be tired, even though I was. And even though I was really stretched thin and I was worn out. So that's something I'm still honestly trying to figure out because I'm lucky enough to, I think, have the freedom to do this for the next few years, if not the rest of my life. We'll see. I'll pivot if that changes. But I think I need to still find that balance between not, if you're lucky enough to do what you love for a living and that gets tiring, then what do you have to fall back on? Um, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get more into exercise, but that's never really been my my thing. I'm still
Right,
figuring it
right.
out. I'm not sure.
I know. Yeah. And maybe, right, maybe it is just something that you figure out what's a new way to charge your batteries since the way that you used to do it has now become your bread and butter and your main focal point, so maybe you try something different, whether it is exercise or, sailing or throwing mud or whatever you want to do. That's like still, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't even have to be creative. It
Right.
could, I think you'll find something. And that's part of the fun of life is just experimenting, trying new things, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like. Knowing what you don't like leads you closer to things that you do like. So everything can teach you something about yourself, in a positive way that's still moving you forward. And I just love how open you are to the process of life because it's a great example to get to see kind of firsthand and, hear about from you directly.
Yeah, of course. I do not want to glamorize this process for what it isn't. It's very fulfilling. Making movies is so much fun, but it's also really, really exhausting, and it will chew you up and spit you out if you don't have the patience. If you don't have the patience, if you don't have the determination to see it through. So it's tough,
Mhm.
but I love it,
Right.
and I just have to see it through, and that means that I have so much more that I still have to figure out,
Yeah.
with finding that work and hobby balance. But I'm
Mhm.
along for the ride, and I want to continue sharing that part of it with people because uh, it's something that not many professionals talk about. They only want to show the highlights and the successes, but my journey is as much a work of art. My life is as much a work of art as the art that I'm making. And if I apply that same openness and creativity to my life that I do my art, then I'll find that, you know, I can overcome struggles and that I can pivot and find new things in life too.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience before we wrap up?
Just to summarize, yeah, don't chase the trends, find your truth, share your process, not a product. We're all invested in journeys. And, if you are interested in social media or, growing a following in a community, I think being
Yeah.
vulnerable and being honest about um, what you're going through and how you're doing it is super important. Be willing to pivot,
Mhm.
follow the open doors, don't knock on those locked ones for longer than they need to be. Um, but at the same time, have a path and continue on that path. Have a destination. Just be willing to take alternate paths to get there.
So beautiful, Julian. Thank you so
Yeah, of
much for sharing that, sharing your story, and for being on the show.
course.
Really means a lot to
Thank
me.
you so much for having me. It was a blast.
You are my most important listener, and I can't thank you enough for spending your time with me. If this content resonates with you, then hit subscribe. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube by following @ConnectorQueen. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Becoming You.